Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Art, ex-scapegoat, ex-family disgrace. And of course, you're looking at a monster who single-handedly caused all of my abusers' mysterious lifelong illnesses. It's funny how these mysterious illnesses always show up at the exact wrong time. Like whenever I wanted to set a boundary, say no to something that makes me uncomfortable, if I have a different opinion, or if God forbid I defend myself or take some distance to protect myself, my mental health, from verbal abuse, physical assaults, passive aggression, guilt trip, silent treatment, and all the wonderful stuff that comes, in the territory of narcissistic family systems when they scapegoat a family member. I've been told that she's been on the brink of death, for decades, lying on her so-called deathbed. And yet somehow she never needed nursing care, never ended up in long-term treatment, and I guess she must have absolutely amazing superhuman stamina, because to keep almost dying for 30, 40 years and still have the strength to yell at me and spend hours on phone calls where she would smear my name over and over to other relatives, and the energy that she would somehow find to get physical with me, and the energy that she would somehow find also to laugh and mock me when I develop panic attacks. I suppose when you do activities that bring you joy, your energy gets revitalized, right? Or maybe, just maybe, she's what we call a covert, vulnerable narcissist, who will use her victimhood and health as a weapon to control the narrative, avoid accountability, and be given the green light to continue abusing the scapegoat because, the narcissist is the only victim that matters, always. And this kind of abuse, is something that the scapegoat fights alone and often has absolutely no support. Because when we finally push back, it's not just trauma and PTSD that we have to deal with. It's the labels that come with the estrangement from the family of origin. Because suddenly, we're going to be branded as the evil traitor, the cold one, the ungrateful child, the one who isn't family oriented, the deserter, the one who has no empathy, the one who's cruel, the one who's evil, the one who's crazy, the one who's selfish, right? And on and on and on. All because we actually dared to prioritize our health, our mental health, our physical health. All because, we chose to focus on a very needed healing. All because we decided that our life actually matters too. And of course in these families, you're not allowed to focus on your healing. How selfish of you if you do that. How dare you protect yourself? How dare you protect yourself? So today, I am going to break down how narcissistic parents use their health to manipulate the scapegoat and to manipulate the entire narcissistic family system, which is so effective. And I'm going to tell you what I did to protect my own sanity. In narcissistic family systems, the children are made responsible for their parents' well-being. In healthy families, it's the other way around. Parents are responsible for their children's physical, emotional, and psychological needs, right? In dysfunctional families, it's all your fault. It was certainly my fault ever since I was 9. I was labeled the family black sheep monster, bad character who deserved all she got, right? It's always our fault. The key point here is conditioning. And it's not just the scapegoat who gets conditioned, because we're trained for our entire life to believe that our entire personality is evil and destructive and that we don't deserve safety in our own home. It's also the enabling family members who get conditioned. They're trained to see the narcissist as a helpless, fragile, misunderstood, poor soul. Someone so deeply wounded and so empathetic, and so wounded by life that their cruelty is excused. After all, there's someone who only wants what's best, even if they're destroying their own child in the process, and their relationships as well. And of course, their mysterious, never-changing illnesses, never-ending illnesses, become the ultimate justification. She's sick, she's hurt, poor her, life has dealt her such a tragic fate, so naturally she gets a free pass to hurt whoever she wants to hurt because she's hurt. It's not her fault, because how dare you question someone who's suffering, right? How dare you question someone who's suffering? So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give you guys 3 personal stories that show the different ways this kind of narcissism operates, right? And each story will highlight a slightly different tactic. But together you get, the bigger picture of how their health is utilized as a weapon. And once I've shared them, I'm going to break it down to what's really happening underneath and why it works so well and how it keeps the scapegoat and the entire narcissistic family system trapped in this role. First story, the one I talked about before in the previous video, so I'm sorry if you've seen it already, if it's repetitive, but it's such an important story to tell when it comes to this subject. I was at my parents' house talking to my mother about something trivial, something platonic, a conversation that was like whatever, And suddenly, out of the blue, she erupts at me, and how dare you speak to me this way? How dare you speak to me this way? And I was like, what? What just happened? What? And again, how dare you speak to me this way? And I was like, what are you talking? What did I say? We were just talking about what? How dare you address me, informally? Apparently that day, my mother decided that I was going to call her ma'am instead of mom, as we were always raised. She wanted me to call her ma'am. Pani in Polish, I come from a Polish family, so, she wanted me to call her Pani, instead of just say mom. Or you, just a normal, as you normally address her. All of a sudden, I had to address her as if this was a formal, I was in a formal setting. And this was brand new. Neither my brother nor I have ever called her ma'am. So of course, or Pani, So of course, I looked at her in shock and I was like, you want me to do what? What? What's this new thing? And she went off telling me how evil I am and my character and how I'm going to destroy her and everything about me is evil. And as she was going off at me, my father, who wasn't home, pulled into the driveway, got out of the car, and then he was about to open the door. And as he was opening the door, she looked over and she pretended to faint. She clutched her heart, and she pretended to faint. My father opened the door, saw her on the floor, and he looked at me and he said, "What did you do again? What did you do?" And he ran over to her. And of course she didn't faint, And then of course, "Are you okay?" And then he picked her up and come to the couch, come. And he took care of her. "Do you need a glass of water?" And I was just watching the thing and I'm like, how am I going to explain this to anybody? That she fainted because that day she decided that I was going to call her ma'am instead of mom, as I always did. And eventually my dad came to talk to me. And, all right, your mom is sick. She has a lot of health troubles. Just call her ma'am, And, and I was like, really? All of a sudden I need to change. Okay. A few weeks later, it wasn't that long after that, my father, wanted us to have a nice family dinner, right? At the table, my brother was there, and he called her mom tons of times. He, in Polish, addressed her informally, "Ona, mama." He spoke in Polish. It was completely informal, and he just talked as we always did. And she was still actually giving me attitude over that fight that we had, you know. And I was just watching the thing, and I was like, wow, I just kept hearing over and over and over. He just kept saying the words, you know, the informal words, and I was just like, wow. And she was like, ha ha ha, and she gets along so nice with the golden child, you know. Story number 2, this was when I actually went no contact, one of the times I went no contact. And my father called me, and he said, your mother has cancer, and her health is deteriorating. And he was talking to me as if it was my last chance to make amends with my mother, because I only have one mother and I will regret it. And she took care of me when I was small, and how cruel and evil of me not to go and all that. Okay, fine. So once again, I broke no contact. I went back. And you know how interesting it is that her cancer somehow disappeared. Poof. Never saw her get chemo. Never saw anything related to this mysterious cancer. It just disappeared. And I guess, of course, you know, I don't know, I guess it's magic or something. And of course, her behavior towards me picked up right where we left off. Third story. This was when I was a teenager, while I was going to school. And I was studying for my finals. And I had a group of friends, and we all took turns to go to each other's houses as in a study group. And so when it was my turn for my friends to come over to my house for the study day, you know, I asked my mom, hey, you know, is it all right if we do a study group on Saturday, Friday? Like, what day is good for you? You know, we have a big exams coming up. I have trouble, you know, with some subjects, and this is really helpful for me. And, you know, and her response, why do you always make your mother suffer? This is a true story. She looked at me. She said, why do you make your mother suffer? Can't you see that I'm tired? Can't you see that I'm sick? You want me to work? You always create so many problems, you know. You need to focus on helping your mother wash the dishes and clean the house. I'm so tired, always so tired. I was so upset, and of course, you know, of course I could never have my needs met as a teenager, as a child, because her needs always competed with mine. And every time I expressed a need or a reasonable want, her health came right up. And of course, you know, I had to come up with an excuse with my study group. And, you know, it sucked, and that was it. I wasn't able to contribute. And the next day, it was really kind of funny that a bunch of neighbors showed up, and she made them tea, and she served them cookies, and she had so much energy, you know, to socialize with the neighbors. And, you know, it was so nice. It was so nice to see how her energy just, you know, came right back, as it usually did if I wasn't involved, you know. And so all these stories are relevant, and they each have a point. What's happening here? Why does the health card work so well? Well, because it taps into 3 things: fear, guilt, and obligation. Fear, guilt, and obligation become major psychological weapons. Fear. Now, the fear that they create, the narcissist creates, affects all family members and anyone connected to them in many different ways. For the scapegoat, especially in the early years and the early stages, you know, the fear is that you're so evil that you can actually make someone sick, and that somehow being yourself is causing illnesses and incredible pain to another person. Just being alive, just the fact that you exist, okay? And that's terrifying when you're a child. And that can cause you to internalize so much shame, thinking that you're truly defective and evil as a person, that you're unlovable. And these are all feelings that we carry within us into adulthood. Then and of course, there's that fear of abandonment, right? That comes into that. Because, of course, if you make your parents sick, maybe they will die, maybe they will disappear, maybe they will never come back, you know? Maybe you're gonna be the reason why they die. And as a child, I mean, you really believe, I mean, I know I believed it. Of course I believed that. And, you know, I internalized that for so many years until I finally snap out of it. But even then, there's a second fear. It's the fear of losing the people that you care about. Because when a narcissist plays that health card, you become the monster with no empathy. Because you see what's going on and they don't. And so your reactions become evil. Well, while they are the helpless victims, even though they abuse you cyclically, that's exactly what happened to me when my mother pretended to faint in front of my father. In that moment, my fear wasn't dying, she was dying, like I know she's like this, It was my father, it was losing my father, because all my father saw was her on the floor and me standing there, and and this happened on a regular basis, right? That she would always have these dramatic reactions for things that she invented. And so the fear of losing family members, actually eventually it came true. But I've made my peace with that because my health matters more, but I'll talk about that more in a second. What happened was that she was so good at doing these things that even my own brother turned on me. And, he told me so many times that I don't care about my family. So the fear of losing everybody in your life because of that one abuser is very real. And it has a foundation. Like at the end of the day, when you do protect yourself, in my experience, they do turn against you. And finally, there's the fear of judgment from society, because let's be honest, what looks worse than abandoning a sick mother? A sick mother, okay? Or a sick family member, whatever your case is. You're terrified of being seen as the cold, ungrateful child when, you're in reality, you're just trying to survive and heal and take care of yourself, which is something that you were never allowed to do. And this leads to the second point, the guilt. And this fear that they construct within you is tied to the guilt. Is the kind of guilt that convinces you that somehow you're responsible for their suffering, that by setting boundaries, you make people suffer, that by saying no, you're causing their health to decline. And when you protect yourself, you're selfish. You are trained to believe that you're selfish for protecting yourself. You're trained to feel guilty for just being you. They will treat you. They will talk to you. They will demonize you. They will tell you that you're ungrateful for everything that they've ever done for you, right? And you owe them a life debt. They will treat you like you owe them a life debt. One that you must repay with your suffering for the rest of your life. And that becomes your role, to suffer endlessly, because your narcissistic parent suffers, so you must suffer. This is like this is the role that they push you into. And yet, there's no accountability. There's no professional intervention. There's no effort to better themselves. Their victimhood becomes a permanent state. They're addicted to victimhood. And this is something that's so hard to explain to people who haven't experienced this kind of relationship. They are addicted to victimhood. They feel good being a victim because they get this validation. They get their supply. That's how they get their supply. And this victimhood becomes a permanent state, and it's accepted as normal by the entire family. In my family, this was normal. Nobody even bothered thinking about getting her treatment. It was just normal. It was something that my brother laughed at because it was so funny. And it was something that my father told me that he'd disown me if I ever brought, a conversation about medical treatment for her into the family ever again. And when my father told me that she was dying of cancer, he didn't just inform me, he weaponized the guilt. He said I only had one mother and I'd regret it forever if I didn't make amends, and so on. In families like this, any act of help, by the way, anything that they've ever done for you, whether it's big or small, is never unconditional, as you know, and that will become leverage. So it's twisted into a reason to normalize abuse, to keep you in guilt, to keep you trapped in this cycle of suffering. So if you don't show up, if you don't suffer, if you don't, submit to this suffering and accept that you're going to have a life of suffering, then they will remind you of everything they've ever done for you. And they tell you, you have to go back to that dynamic and continue suffering because that is your debt towards us. And like I said, of course, I went back and the cancer disappeared. No chemo, no treatments, nothing. It's never about health. It's always about guilt and, tactics to get the scapegoat to return so that everything in the family is normal and happy again, right? And this ties to my third point, obligation. Society says, honor your mother, honor your father, right? And when health gets added to that equation on top of that, the obligation becomes crushing. Even if they abused you so much that you grew physically ill, and emotionally ill, even if you were diagnosed with anxiety, panic disorder, whatever happened to you, if you lived in a dissociation state because of trauma, none of that matters to them. The message remains the same. You still owe them. You must sacrifice yourself, no matter the cost, to your body, your mind, your life, and your soul. And, when I wanted to host that study group in my house, instead of simply saying, no, not this week, I'm tired, or maybe compromise, okay, but you do the dishes and you clean up anything, right? My mother leaned on obligation. Why do you always make your mother suffer? Can't you see I'm tired and sick? Why don't you focus on taking care of your mother, washing the dishes, cleaning the house instead? And I was forced to cancel the study group. But the next day, she served the neighbors full of energy, right? I mean, when people that she liked came over, it was never a problem. So her illness wasn't about health. Again, it was about control through obligation. It was about using obligation to make me feel selfish, ungrateful, and wrong for having normal needs, for wanting to have friends, for wanting to have fun, for wanting to do well in school. And that's why the health card is so effective. It's never actually about their sickness. It's about keeping you tied through fear of losing connection, guilty for having boundaries, and this obligation to always put them first because that is your duty, that is your life debt that you have. And once you've been conditioned to respond to those three triggers, fear, guilt, and obligation, they don't need to argue anymore. They can control you with a single phone call. Now here is what I want to say about that, okay? First of all, you must learn to detach from the guilt. Inquire within as to how you experience it. Do you have images in your head? Do you see people suffering? Is it like a physical feeling in your chest, your throat, deep sadness? You have to become aware because guilt is such a vulnerability in narcissistic family systems, and you don't always have to believe it. It's important that you realize, that this guilt is conditioning. It's something that they can trigger within you. They will say that you're cruel. They will say that you'll regret whatever forever. But the reality is that what you will actually regret is not walking away sooner, is not taking care of your health sooner. You will regret all the years you sacrificed your peace, your health, and your life for the sake of their performance. Whatever is your vulnerability, they know it, and then they will use it against you to control you. And the second thing is really a reality check, okay? That's what I want to tell you is their health may or may not be real, the situation that they're in for their health, right? Sometimes it's exaggerated. Sometimes it's, a fabrication. It could be genuine. But the key is that either way, it's actually not your responsibility. Adults manage their own medical care. You're not their caretaker unless you freely choose to be their caretaker. Their health does not override your right to boundaries and to a life of peace after a lifetime of being scapegoated, after a lifetime of not being permitted to take care of yourself. And of course, as they age and as life progresses, there will come a time where they may develop legitimate health problems. And in my experience, that's exactly when the enablers turn around to you and say, see, after all these years, finally here's the proof. You see, you were wrong to pull away. You should feel guilty now. But let's be honest here. Every human being eventually faces health problems. Illness is a part of aging, not evidence that your boundaries were cruel or unjustified. The reality is that narcissistic parents and their neighbors will twist natural life events into ammunition to keep you locked in obligation. Their health is not your debt. Your abuser's health is not your debt. You don't owe your abuser anything. You don't owe anyone anything. And you don't owe anyone anything because that's not how healthy relationships work. Love is not a debt. Care is not a debt. Respect is not a debt. Any talk of you owing something is toxic. It's manipulation to trap you in fear, guilt, and obligation. In healthy relationships, support flows freely. It isn't tallied up like a bill you're forced to pay with your suffering. When someone says you owe them for existing, for being raised, or for the scraps of care that they gave you, while at the same time causing you incredible harm, what they're really saying is, I own you. Okay? I own you. And that's why they feel that they have the right to hurt you and to abuse you. They think they have the right to do those things. Just like my mother thought that she has the right to hurt me and to do those things. And that's not love. There is no love in that picture. That is control. That's all that is. You are not in anybody's debt. You're a human being and you have the right to live a life free of emotional blackmail. So of course the third thing is boundaries, and I'm a big advocate of going no contact. You have to protect yourself, and sometimes that means that we have to be alone for some time. And I went through it. I spent many years living my life alone, actually in a foreign country for a long time even. And you're allowed to pause, you're allowed to ask yourself, is this good for me? If they call you because they have some sort of urgent health thing, is this real? Is this urgent? Or is this manipulation dressed up as an emergency to trigger the guilt conditioning? Boundaries mean that you decide what's best for you, not them. They don't get to decide your boundaries. You decide your boundaries. And the last thing is you have to focus on your own health. You have to prioritize your own health. If you have kids, your kids need you to prioritize your own health for them, okay? You owe it to yourself to take care of yourself first. Your well-being is actually not an option because you need your body, you need your mind to function, to work, to wake up every day, and to do what you need to do. It's not selfish to protect your mind, your body, and your life. A sick parent, real or imagined, does not give them the right to make you sick too. You are not required to trade your sanity and your health for their approval. Protecting your sanity is not cruelty, it's your right, it's survival. It's what you're supposed to do. And the moment you step out of fear and guilt and obligation, you reclaim something they can never manipulate, never take away from you, and that's your peace. That's your peace. And so I hope this helped you, and remember to always repeat, I love myself, I trust myself, and I'll see you soon.